Everyone online says investing gets easier after you reach 100,000 euros. But based on my 2 decades of investing experience, both on Wall Street and as a former pension fund CEO, I believe it's the exact opposite. It gets harder. And the most expensive problem, it hurts you long before you even notice it. Okay, but first, let me acknowledge there is one major way in which investing gets easier after you reach 100K. So let's say you put aside 600 euros per month, and you earn a moderate investment profit of 7% per year. In 10 years, you will reach 103,000 euros. So that's wonderful. And if you then stopped saving any new money at all, if all you did was just keep your portfolio invested, you would reach 200,000 euros in another 10 years. In other words, your first 100K would come after a decade of hard work and disciplined saving, but the next would happen passively because of your investment profits. After you reach 100,000, your portfolio gains real momentum because your profits are now just as powerful as the money that you put aside. But now we get to the problems at this level. The first one is best illustrated by my student Lisa, who came to me after receiving an inheritance. For an entire year, she had 150,000 euros just sitting in the bank. And this was during COVID, when inflation spiked like crazy. Her money lost something like 10% of its value while she waited. Lisa knew that she should have been investing, but every time she sat down to do it, there were so many questions. Which investments to buy, what app to use, what to do about taxes. She felt like one mistake could cost her years of retirement savings. And she wasn't wrong. I mean, when your portfolio is 5,000 euros, a 20% mistake costs you 1,000. You work for another month or two and you earn that money back. But make that same 20% mistake on 100,000 and now you've lost 20,000. That's years of saving for most people. So the first problem is that investing mistakes get a lot more scary once you hit 100,000 invested. Now, fortunately, the mistakes that cost people the most are almost always the same. There's day trading and options and Forex, which is just financial gambling. And if you want to see how that goes, spend 5 minutes reading the Reddit forum Wall Street Bets, where you will see stories like this one, or this one, or this one. Then there's putting your money into individual stocks without diversification, which is highly risky. There's trying to time the market and predict crashes, which does not work. And there's betting on theme ETFs, which get hyped up right before years of horrible performance, like Cathie Wood's ARK Innovation ETF, which cost investors billions for exactly that reason. Avoid these basic mistakes and your 100,000 is already much safer. All right, let's move on to the second problem, which gets a lot more painful when your portfolio gets bigger. When you're investing your first 500 euros, you likely don't worry much about which investment brokerage to use. You just want one that is simple and convenient. But once your portfolio grows, you get worried about the safety of your money. Now, the good news is that any licensed brokerage here in Europe is quite safe by design. Your investments are held separately from the brokerage's assets. So even if the brokerage does go bankrupt, your money should be protected. But in life, nothing is 100% safe. There have been cases such as Beaufort Securities in the UK, where a brokerage collapses and investor money is at risk because of either fraud or technical incompetence. So it's important to check the license, reputation, and financial stability of your brokerage. But that's only part of the challenge. Just as importantly, in my personal opinion, not every brokerage is well suited to a 6-figure investment portfolio. Some of the most popular brokerages online, and these are good brokerages by the way, like Revolut or Trading 212, I mean, they have an average account size of just a few thousand euros. Their product offering, the fee structure, the customer service experience is optimized for beginners who are playing with small sums. By contrast, there are other major brokerages such as Interactive Brokers or Swissquote, where the average account size is over 100,000 euros. But these brokerages are often more technical and more difficult to use. Plus, they can also be more expensive. And then you have to consider which brokerage will be best for your individual taxes. So this is why choosing the right brokerage is one of the key priorities for many of my students, like Antonis from Greece, who said, "I'm 52 and I knew money sitting in the bank loses value to inflation, but I was afraid to trust my money to a broker. let alone online, let alone in another country. Tom's training helped me choose a broker and understand how my money is protected so I could finally start investing. Okay, but now for the third problem that you face once you hit 100K. This one has been particularly relevant the past 5 or 6 years, where people constantly tell me things like this. Tom, I really want to start investing, but I've been reading the news and I'm worried about X. In recent years, X has been COVID, high inflation, Trump's tariffs, the AI revolution, the Iran crisis, and much more. There is always something happening in the news, and it's natural for people to worry that they might invest their life savings at the wrong time and then the market crashes. So the third problem we need to address is fear of a market crash. And the thing is, this fear is not entirely without a basis. From time to time, the stock market does crash. And at 6 figures plus, investing right before a market crash could potentially wipe tens of thousands from your savings, at least temporarily. So this is why people either delay investing their savings or they live in constant stress about the market. Fixing this challenge requires changing your mindset. Instead of fearing crashes, you have to expect crashes as a normal part of investing, and you have to choose a strategy that is built to survive them. Step 1, make sure you have a good enough safety cushion so you can cover your spending needs when times get tough without being forced to sell your investments. Step 2, check that you're properly diversified so you're not too exposed to a crash in any single sector like US tech stocks. And step 3, adjust the risk level in your portfolio to match your age and time horizon. If you're close to retirement, you should not be investing 100% of your savings in stocks. If you add lower risk investments like bond ETFs, you can significantly reduce the risks of investing. Okay, but the fourth problem that hits you somewhere around 6 figures is kind of like a diet of burgers and fries. You can get away with it for years until suddenly the damage becomes obvious when it's already too late. For example, my student Ivan inherited roughly 200,000 euros of investments from his parents. These investments were held in an actively managed fund at a German bank, and this was a fund that had an annual cost of 1.5% per year. Ivan immediately saw that this was a problem because 1.5% on 200 grand is 3,000 euros a year. That's a nice vacation that you're paying your bank just to manage your money. But the short-term impact of these fees is only half the story. Ivan's parents had been investing with this bank for decades. This is something that's critically important, so let me explain what typically happens. So at some point in your life, you realize you should be investing your savings, but you don't know anything about stocks or bonds or brokerages, and you feel a bit overwhelmed. So you go to your bank and you ask them to invest for you. And they tell you, sure, we have great experts for that, and we'll only charge you 1.5% per year. Which sounds good because when you're investing your first 5,000 euros, 1.5% per year is just 75 euros, not such a big deal. But let's look at the same calculator as before. Remember how if you put aside 600 euros a month, earning 7% a year, you get to 103,000 in 10 years? Well, if you're paying a 1.5% management fee, you get to 95,000. That's 8,000 less. Now, this is painful enough. But it's not a game changer, and this is why many people don't really start paying attention to fees for years. The real kicker is the next 10 years. Without fees, your portfolio grows to 305,000. With fees, it's just 258,000. Or give it another decade. Without fees, you end up with 704,000. With fees, it's just 536,000. That's 168,000 of your retirement savings gone because you trusted your bank to invest for you. And that's exactly why this fourth problem, high investment fees, is so dangerous, why it's a silent killer, which often only becomes obvious after you hit 100K. And the earlier you fix it, the better. That's what my student Christoph did. He said, my banker offered to manage my portfolio at a cost of 0.7% per year. Tom's training taught me how to build a better portfolio with a one-time cost of 0.05% with no yearly portfolio management fees. All right, and now we get to the fifth problem, which becomes very relevant once you hit 100,000 invested. It's a problem almost nobody talks about because it's a little uncomfortable. It's not the most fun to think about, but it could make a big difference for your family. A few years ago, a friend of mine who was my age at the time, just under 40, went on a business trip abroad. He left his wife and kids back in Latvia to wait for his return. But unfortunately, that never happened. He developed a health issue while traveling and passed away. And I know for a fact that he didn't anticipate this. He had big plans for the future. And unfortunately, those plans didn't include passing his investments to his wife and kids in the case of his death. It took his family a lot of effort and stress to track down his investment accounts as part of the inheritance process. And in many cases, such accounts are never actually discovered. There are trillions of euros worth of money and investments sitting in so-called stranded bank, brokerage, and retirement accounts around the world. These are accounts which people either forgot about or where the holders died and their heirs never found out about them. If you've got money sitting in a foreign brokerage and something happens to you, your family might never even realize the money was there. And of course, inheritance also presents other challenges, like who gets the money and what paperwork needs to be done. That's why I teach my students inheritance basics, and I show them how to prepare a shared Google Doc so that your family knows what to do. It's not a good idea to share logins and passwords to your brokerage accounts because your family will have to go through the inheritance process before they are legally allowed to use the money. But they do need to have a clear map of where your investments sit, and they need a simple plan to follow. Now, the friend that I mentioned earlier, his family figured all of this out in the end, but it cost them months of stress during the worst period of their lives. A single document shared with the people you love could avoid that. Okay, so far we've covered 5 major problems that catch European investors off guard after reaching 100,000 euros. But knowing about these problems is only half the battle. The other half is building a strategy that actually protects against them so that you can grow and protect your savings both before hitting 100K and long after. And that's why I put together a step-by-step training on this exact topic. To check it out, just follow the first link in the description of this video.